So, Bitty man. Bitty. Mr. Bitty, Rupert Bitty-Murdoch has decided to, you know, help stir the hatred up for his Zionist employers, his Zionist elite, you know, because it's all part of their protocols of Zion in taking final control to put their new world order in. They need to have the Goyim at each other's throats while in the midst of a universal banking crash. Yeah, written in 1911, published in English in 1911. Okay. Apparently a hoax. Well, look at today. Banking crash. Getting the Goyim. Because Goyim is every non-Jew. It includes Muslims as well as Christians, Hindus, you name it. If you're not Jewish, you're a Goyim. Cattle. Okay. So now they are disgustingly giving a huge advertisement to a group of radical extremists, okay, who we don't even know who they are, okay. They're giving them mass publicity, a huge advertisement. It was from a video on YouTube, okay. So a group of radical crazed extremists make a video on YouTube, next minute it's in the Telegraph, and then the Sun is giving the mass publicity to their call, for all-out war to mark the start of Ramadan by attacking innocents and civilians in their homes, markets and roads. What kind of twisted terrorist media would give mass publicity to this kind of hate speech and at the same time show pictures of the bleeding, injured victims of Manchester? When you know people are already traumatised, they're suffering post-traumatic stress, and so Mr. Rupert Bitty-Murdoch decides to give a huge free advertisement to ISIS. And all based on what? All based on what? A YouTube video. But you can't show the YouTube videos of British people, can you? British people talking sense. British people asking serious questions about serious issues. Like, for example, who's protecting our children in this country? Because actually, when it comes down to child protection, pedo sadists are the ones getting protected. And like I say, we know that all of this, these people are funded by MI5, MI6, CIA, Mossad. That's who they're all working for. We've got the solid evidence. There's no getting away from it. Senior European intelligence officials tell Time that Abu Qatada is tucked away in a safe house in north of England, where he and his family are being lodged, fed and clothed by British intelligence services. One of Al-Qaeda's most dangerous figures. Okay. British intelligence is saying they have no idea where he is, but we know where he is. And if we know, I'm quite sure they do. Yeah, almost a year later, Abu Qatada was found hiding in a flat not far from Scotland Yard. You know, they're all at it. Him. Okay. And here's another one, you know, I showed in the thing. It's rather interesting, the BBC would report the British government has tried for 20 years to prosecute Chowdhury. It has spent at least that long enforcing a covenant of security, protecting a number of radical Islamists and their imams, including Abu Hamza al-Masri and Abu Qatada. Hamza's right-hand man was Harun Rashid Aswat. He was pegged as the mastermind of the London 7/7 bombings. Like Hamza, Aswat is a British intelligence agent. Here he is, okay? This was from Fox News. This was like first published in August 2005. John Loftus is a terrorism expert and former prosecutor for the Justice Department, US. So, all these guys should be going back to an organisation called Al-Muhajirun, which means the emigrants. It was the recruiting arm of Al-Qaeda in London. In London! They specialised in recruiting kids whose families had emigrated to Britain, but who had British passports, and they would use them for terrorist work. So, a couple of them now have Somali connections. Yeah, it was not unusual. Somalia, Eritrea. The first group, of course, were primarily Pakistani, but what they had in common was that they were all emigrant groups in Britain, recruited by this Al-Muhajirun group. They were headed by the Captain Hook, the Imam in London at the Finsbury Mosque, without the arm. He was head of that organisation. Now, his assistant was a guy named Aswat, Harun Rashid Aswat. Aswat, who they picked up. Yeah, right, Aswat is believed to be the mastermind of all the bombings in London. This is the guy. And what's really embarrassing is that the entire British police are out chasing him. And one wing of the British government, MI6, or the British Secret Service, has been hiding him. And this has been the real source of contention between the CIA, the Justice Department, and Britain. MI6 has been hiding him. Are you saying that he's been working for them? Oh, I'm not saying it. This is what the Muslim Sheikh said in an interview in a British newspaper back in 2001. So he's a double agent, or was. He's a double agent. So he's working for the Brits to try to give them information about Al-Qaeda, but in reality he's an Al-Qaeda operative. Yeah. We know. Okay. Because that is how, isn't it? That is how Netanyahu, who was staying in a London hotel on the day of the London 7/7 bombings, he got pre-warned that morning by Mossad, by Israeli intelligence. He got a warning before the attack happened. And now we know why, don't we? We know how. But you know, we're supposed to ignore all of this. We're supposed to ignore solid evidence from USA intelligence sources, from non-corrupt European intelligence sources, and even from British intelligence sources. We are supposed to ignore these facts and instead get all angry and upset and focus on what the Sun's giving us, aren't we? What Mr. Bitty-Man's giving us. We're supposed to focus on this. We're supposed to now get really angry and do exactly what the Zionists want their cattle to do, is to all get at each other's throats. Hate each other. Divide and rule. That's what this is about. But meanwhile, you know, these good Muslims, why couldn't the Sun write a headline from the good Muslims to reassure the people of Manchester, to, calm down the post-trauma? But oh no, he's got to be there. They've got to be there to feed on the blood of the sufferer. Vampires. These are real Muslims, okay? And the real Muslims are exactly what the Western intelligence Zionist services have created, because they want to stamp these out, okay? Because they do uphold human rights. And they want to stamp these people out. They want to stamp they want to rob them of the rights. They want to invade their countries. They want to enslave them to make them, you know, more add to their Goyim cattle numbers and corporatise their nations as they're doing to Britain. But instead, Britain, instead of focusing on the real issue, the real problem, no, instead we've all got to hate Muslims. Because a group of mad people can make a video on YouTube and next minute the British media, the Telegraph and the Sun are there giving them mass publicity. How dare they? How dare they give an advertisement? Because that's what this is, isn't it? It's an advertisement. They're a voice box now. They are repeating this horrible call to war from mad people who aren't even Muslims, because in the month of Ramadan you're supposed to be peaceful and forgiving and kind, and certainly not attacking innocents. And that is that they created this bogeyman, okay, and now they created him, you know, and they do recruit. They are getting more and more recruits, because as Muslims in those countries witness what the West has done, how difficult is it for somebody whose wife's given birth to how many dead, deformed babies because of the depleted uranium that was used to liberate them? You think maybe that guy might suddenly, you know, he might suddenly respond to somebody like Abu HAMZA. And what kind of guy would MI5 recruit in order to pose as a radical Islamist? What kind of mentality would accept such a position? Oh yeah, a former strip club boss, that's who. Already treats women like chattel. And what is he preaching? Oh, do you want to have full control over women? Would you like to be able to marry 8-year-old girls? Would you like the opportunity to chop teenagers' heads off for watching football or listening to rock music? Come and join our group. We'll send you to Pakistan, we'll arm you, we'll fund you, we'll train you. And before you know it, you'll be in a Middle Eastern country having the time of your life. Cue the broken record, ladies and gentlemen. Every single time that an Islamic hate preacher arrives on the scene, after a period of time that either culminates in their death, or more properly put, their liquidation as their usefulness has expired. Their arrest or their departure to some hotspot where the big powers have strategic interests at stake and need a bogeyman to justify an invasion or neo-colonial takeover. A mainstream news story emerges which reveals their ties to one of the many intelligence services of the world, Zionism. In this case it's MI5. These hate preachers, who are the personification of a false flag, not only serve geopolitical objectives in the classical resource-grabbing imperialist sense, but also in the spiritual, historical, ideological sense, as well as Jewish/Zionist domestic goals. As they stoke the flames of Islamophobia and plant the seeds for an increasingly bigoted anti-Muslim populace on one hand, which equates a handful of knuckleheads run by intelligence services with the entirety of the global Muslim population, and an increasingly bigoted anti-Muslim far right on the other hand, which tells European working classes that there is an exceedingly hostile Muslim problem, while of course conveniently leaving out all the juicy detail that their own paymasters are Zionist Jews, the super elite of the West, whom are the architects and financiers of Islamophobia to begin with. You see, the monster on the left, and then they need the monster on the right, don't they? The two monsters, they create one monster out of the other, and then them two monsters have a fight, and while they're fighting, okay, all the good people, okay, the good people, we're the ones that are going to get killed. That's what it's about. They use their monsters, and that's why I appeal to British people, back away from these far-right extremists. They are feeding on the blood of the sufferers, okay, because I'll tell you what's really going on. This is the real terrorist threat. Our human rights to be scrapped. Can you imagine what people in this country would be doing if this government said they were going to scrap animal rights? Think about it. Yeah, and it will be put on hold until Brexit, because they can't do it while we're in Europe. But this is a terrorist threat. And a government that would propose to do this is a terrorist government. And yes, of course, their intelligence will be training and recruiting and creating terrorists, won't they? Yes. And we're supposed to ignore, like I say, we're supposed to ignore this solid evidence. There's no getting away from the facts in order to be thoroughly influenced and to thoroughly put every thought and feeling that we have into responding and reacting to Mr. Bitty-Man's advertisement on behalf of a group of radical extremists who've made a YouTube video. Give their YouTube video mass publicity. Make yourself a recording, you know. Voice it for them. Publish, give them mass publicity throughout Britain. Feed the alternative right, the far right of Britain now. The Muslim haters who themselves love this. This is food for them, isn't it? It's food. Yeah. Zionist Jews, that's who's running these. The super elite of the West, whom are the architects and financiers of Islamophobia to begin with. Yeah. This continues. The Jewish neocon false paradigmatic construct of the clash of civilizations gives the controlled opposition in the left plenty of ammunition to move forward with the peddling of its fraudulent blowback theories, and keeps Eastern Muslims and Western white Christians at war with each other, while organised Jewish interests kick back and laugh at the Goyim at each other's throats. See? That's exactly what they're doing. TAKFIRI assets like Abu HAMZA are more than mere foot soldiers of Zion. They are the very fuel which international Jewry / Zionry needs to feed the conflagration that is the global war on terror. And it is for this reason that exposing them and like similar collaborationist forces is of paramount strategic importance for the resistance camp. And we do expose them. And that's what I'm doing here in this video. I am exposing, okay, in order to help the British people in this time of crisis, in this time of stress, in this time of post-trauma. I am a survivor. I suffer from complex PTSD. I understand what post-trauma is, and I understand how evil people will feed and take advantage of our trauma. Okay, because they've got their own interests. They're not bothered about us. Because if they were bothered about us, okay, in a time of the terror levels of threat that have been going on in this world, nobody would have got into that arena without being searched. And, you know, they are now using this to create more hatred. And it is up to us to, you know, stand up, accept the facts. That's what's helped me with my PTSD, is getting real, is understanding the truth, the facts. Understanding that how things happened, why they happened. You know, I have devoted my life to trying to understand what is going on. Why are these things happening in my country that is supposed to be civilized? How can a child suffer such abuse? How can a whole system stand to protect the abuser? And I needed to understand why. Because obviously there's a problem. Because I don't want more children. I don't think children should grow up like that and then have to cope with complex PTSD and be arrested by flashbacks suddenly in the middle of your life, in the middle of your adult life. And this is why. This is why. Because we are being treated like cattle and we're being fed false information. They're giving spotlight to terrorists. Okay. Feeding on hate. Creating hate groups and giving them mass publicity. You know, we all know BBC Newsnight. Jeremy Paxman gave, what was it, a 15-20 minute interview with an EDL, some far-right guy who, you know, promotes racism, who feeds on stuff like this. And yet he gets an interview on Newsnight. And look how many intelligent British people there are in our country who are speaking intelligently and, you know, telling people the truth. And do they get a 20-minute interview on Newsnight? I tell you, if ever they do, know that this country has managed to kick these crazy ballheads out of our yard.